Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wrestling Discussions. In today's episode, well, we got quite a few different various topics to discuss. One of which is the newest signing to WWE, Dragon Lee. Now, Dragon Lee coming up in Ring of Honor as well as AAA, which is a wrestling promotion down in Mexico. Um, Dragon Lee, incredible athlete, incredible wrestler. Um, he's certainly done quite a bit that there is to do in this business. He is a former Ring of Honor TV champion. He is a former Ring of Honor Tag Team champion, and he is brother to a former Ring of Honor World Champion, Roosh, who is also currently signed with AEW. Now, Dragon Lee recently announced, after a match he did in Mexico, recently announced that he will be taking his services and his wrestling capabilities over to that of WWE. And it is also said that he is now the highest paid NXT superstar since the leaving of Mandy Rose. And, well, I mean, do I think he doesn't deserve it? No, the man obviously deserves it. He deserves a big contract. He's a big name. Personally, I don't really know if he needs to go down to NXT. I'm not saying put him straight in the main roster, maybe give him some proper build up down in NXT, but I'm hoping they use him better than guys like Nathan Frazier and Axiom. I think Dragon Lee honestly could go straight for the North American Championship. I think he could go straight for the NXT Championship. I think Dragon Lee versus Braun Breaker would be a great match. And honestly, I think Dragon Lee could beat Braun Breaker. Now, that's just my opinion. Dragon Lee going over to NXT, my thoughts on that, my thoughts on Dragon Lee going to WWE in general, I'm very happy with. I think Dragon Lee is a great recruit. I think he's a great athlete, a great wrestler, and I'm glad to see his uses go over to that of WWE, because since the disbandment of Ring of Honor, since AEW buying out Ring of Honor, Dragon Lee really hasn't had the proper utilization. He hasn't been capitalized on by Tony Khan, nor by Impact Wrestling, because I know his friend Kenny King went over to Impact, and Dragon Lee was never really picked up there by Impact, and he was never really capitalized on over in AEW. And so I think it's safe to say that this was a smart choice by Dragon Lee to go over to WWE, because this is now the second Ring of Honor superstar since the whole fallout of Ring of Honor to go over to NXT. Current NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez used to go by Roxy down in Ring of Honor, and now she's over at NXT, and she's been doing very, very, very well for herself. I think Dragon Lee will do very well for himself as well. I think I think Dragon Lee can do amazing. I think Dragon Lee could go straight. Honestly, I think he needs to be put in an immediate title picture, whether it be with that of NXT North American Champion Wes Lee or that of the NXT Champion Braun Breaker. I think Dragon Lee needs to be put in a title picture almost immediately. While on the topic of NXT, sticking kind of with the Dragon Lee thing, but also kind of branching out a little bit with NXT, I think Roxanne Perez as NXT Women's Champion is going to really boost the NXT Women's division. I honestly, I think having Roxanne Perez and then adding Dragon Lee to the mix, I think that's a great hand that WWE was dealt, because it really puts those two in a great position, because these are two wrestlers that came up from Ring of Honor. These are two wrestlers that, Roxanne Perez originally went over to that of Impact Wrestling, and I don't think she really went over there to stay over there, but she did go over there for a night, had a match, lost her title, and then a few weeks later came over to WWE NXT as Roxanne Perez. And immediately she was kind of skyrocketed into what was a very entertaining and very amazing title match with Mandy Rose, and then she was put into a second title match with Mandy Rose where she actually secured the title. And same can be said with Dragon Lee. I mean, Dragon Lee has done some amazing things down in Ring of Honor. He tried doing some things in AEW, but I don't think it really stuck. And it probably also didn't help that he didn't have a full contract with AEW, and so they didn't feel as obligated to really utilize him. Same with that of, down in Mexico, he was kind of a free agent. He didn't really have a full contract. And so when he finally did, I think when negotiations started coming up and he started talking to that of Triple H and, other people, I think Dragon Lee just said, you know what, I'm going to sign with WWE. I like WWE. And I think Dragon Lee's wrestling style will go well with that of WWE. I'm very excited to see him come down to WWE. I'm very excited to see his wrestling capability and his wrestling style enter the WWE because it's something we're not quite used to seeing all the time. While staying on NXT, while staying on the topic of NXT, I am going to transfer over real quick to a specific William Regal. So, William Regal has officially left AEW. His last appearance, technically his last appearance was when he got knocked out by MJF. However, some people might also consider his last appearance the interview that he did with Tony Schiavone that was then put on television the week following, where he basically told the rest of the Blackpool Combat Club that I believe in all of you and I think you all are going to do amazing. Specifically talking to that of Bryan Danielson, Wheeler Yuta, Claudio Castagnoli, and Jon Moxley. All around, I think William Regal leaving AEW, personally, I kind of like it. William Regal was great in AEW. I think his promo skill was incredible in AEW because I think William Regal is that of a very uncensored kind of guy. His promo skills get better and better the more uncensored he's allowed to be. And I think everyone can agree that in WWE, the censorship is very high, whereas in AEW, it's a little more in the middle. And then in Impact, it's a lot lower, as we saw with the promo between that of Bully Ray and Tommy Dreamer. But we'll talk about that on a later date. For now, though, sticking with the William Regal topic, William Regal honestly did some of his best work down in AEW. But I also think his best work was the work of someone that was only meant to play a role for a specific set amount of time. And so it's kind of good that he left, because I feel as though if he stayed, he would have gotten old, he would have gotten redundant, and people wouldn't have liked him as much anymore. He was only there for maybe a little less than a year, but he still had such an impact. I mean, he still brought together that of the Blackpool Combat Club, even if they weren't together for that long. He still, kind of elevated MJF into the title picture a little bit. I mean, whatever people want to say, I do think William Regal had a role of kind of helping elevate MJF into that title picture in the sense that his placement kind of made MJF's title picture storyline a little more believable, a little more properly built up. And it just made a little more sense, I think, to kind of have that. Now, it was stated that William Regal is supposed to go to WWE. And as far as I know, it is officially January 1st, so Happy New Year's, everyone. As far as I know, on January 1st, he's officially signed with WWE from what I've heard. And they want to get him, on TV, soon as they can. So I don't know if that means they're going to try and put him in on Tuesday and, make an announcement on Tuesday and say, oh, William Regal's back. Or I also heard that there's a potential that he'll be back at the very first NXT pay-per-view that comes out. So, I mean, watch out for that, because that could very well happen as well. And then you also have, obviously, the idea of him not just coming back in NXT, but he's also supposedly coming back as WWE's vice president. Now, this switches things up, right? Because this is probably one of the biggest positions William Regal has ever had in all of professional wrestling. Now, yes, he has had backstage wrestling roles before that were actual like producer like roles, and he has, he has been a trainer for NXT developmental. He has been very involved with NXT, but this is now vice president of all WWE, including that of Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, as far as I am aware. You can let me know if I'm wrong, in the comments below. Feel free. But I personally, the idea of William Regal being vice president, that's an interesting concept, because we've already seen what we like with Triple H, right? We've already seen this great thing with Triple H. And we know how much we like William Regal. I mean, if you go back to NXT in the black and gold days, it was some of the best wrestling, some of the best storylines, and the crowd loved every second of it. The crowd at home, the crowd, the crowd in the arena. It was incredible. And I think William Regal being vice president right next to that of Triple H, I think WWE is only going to get that much better. It's only going to get that much sweeter. And I think after William Regal's little adventure in AEW, I think he might be able to give Triple H some tips, because Triple H has said this before. He is someone that he is a lot more willing to change than that of Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon was always a little scared of evolution, and he was always scared of changing the brand of what, you know what I mean? He, like, when WCW came along back in the day, he wanted to stick with the gimmicks, whereas Triple H and Shawn Michaels realized that if they didn't evolve, if they didn't change, they were going to be second best to that of a certain WCW. And that's what was happening with AEW. But now I think it's safe to say that WWE is 100% getting back on track and 100% becoming a strong rival to that of AEW. And I think with William Regal not only going to AEW and being signed with AEW for quite some time, but now going over to that of WWE, like going back to WWE, I think he'll be able to share some tips and give Triple H some ideas of how they can change and how they can evolve even more and step through that forbidden line, maybe just a little bit further. But yes, all in all, I think the idea of William Regal becoming vice president, I think that's a smart idea. I think that's an exciting idea and something I certainly want to see. Now, taking a step back and looking a little bit at what we've been seeing over at, taking a step back and looking at what we've been seeing with AEW. Everything so far down in AEW has been going smoothly, right? I think it's safe to say that AEW has officially climbed itself out of the hole that CM Punk dug for them. And I think it's safe to say that AEW is on track for a great year of 2023. Honestly, I think one of the hottest things right now in AEW is a certain Orange Cassidy. And I know some people might not like that, but look at what Orange Cassidy has been doing. I mean, he has been defending that AEW All-Atlantic Championship almost every week. He's been wrestling just about every single week. He's been on TV just about every single week. The Best Friends have been on TV just about every single week. And he's been putting on match after match, moment after moment. And he's been putting more stars over and introducing more stars, as he always does. He helped kind of he's helping, with Kip Sabian coming back, and Kip Sabian kind of coming back as this larger athlete than he was before. And he also kind of helped introduce Trent Seven to the idea of AEW. And we've seen Trent Seven down in Ring of Honor now, kind of looking at the Ring of Honor Pure title, perhaps looking over at Wheeler Yuta, who is the current Ring of Honor Pure Champion. Now, looking specifically, though, at Orange Cassidy, the dude, honestly, he deserves this title. I mean, his matches in 2022 and even 2021, his title matches were just an evident symbol of how much he wanted it and how much he really deserved the gold. Because there were multiple occasions where he had fought for a title belt and unfortunately came up short. unfortunately did not win it. He always struggled winning the big one, and I think this was a great sign of showing that he can and will come through when he needs to. Now, looking over at Jungle Boy Jack Perry, Jungle Boy's been doing semi-well for himself. I think since going into the singles division and becoming more of an independent star, it brings up a couple questions, because Jungle Boy is clearly kind of moving on from that of a certain Luchasaurus and Christian Cage, but the question is Christian Cage and Luchasaurus walking away from a certain Jungle Boy? I think Jungle Boy is a great athlete. I think he's one hell of a wrestler. However, I feel as though the build-up that he's been given all these years, it doesn't do him justice for the current storyline that he's in. I think the idea of Jungle Boy and Hook working together against Lee Moriarty and Big Bill, now this is just me personally, I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's a terrible concept. Big Bill, first of all, is 7 foot tall, even slightly taller than that. And you expect me to believe that Jungle Boy, Jack Perry, and Hook are two people that could actually fight him? Now, yeah, sure, Hook was fairly close to lifting up Big Bill, but that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, we've seen small guys pick up big guys before and still lose, and still get demolished and destroyed, and I think Jungle Boy and Hook are no exception to that. Honestly, I don't like the idea of putting Jungle Boy in this concept of, David versus Goliath. I mean, Jungle Boy versus... Look at Jungle Boy versus Luchasaurus at Full Gear. Yeah, sure, Jungle Boy won the match, but at what cost? I mean, Luchasaurus controlled most of the match, and it was a great match, but it's one of those things where Jungle Boy is beating these bigger competitors that honestly, they should be utilized a little better. They should be utilized as such, as destructive characters, not as people that get, you know what I mean? Like, they're using Jungle Boy too much as the David and Goliath kind of guy. They used him against Luchasaurus, they used him against Brian Cage, and now they're using him against Big Bill. I don't understand it. I don't understand why they're trying to do this with Jungle Boy right now. I think it's early. I don't know. I think Jungle Boy is in a position in his career, personally, where I think Jungle Boy could go for that of the AEW World Championship. Because I think Jungle Boy as AEW World Champion is something everyone wants, and I think it's something everyone can get behind. Yeah, sure, it's early in his career, but I think even now that would be a great concept, and it would be a great storyline. I mean, look at what we've seen with MJF. MJF already kind of slowly put over Ricky Starks a little bit through the concept of being AEW World Champion. And could you imagine if we could see MJF versus Jungle Boy again? We've seen it in the past. We've seen MJF beat Jungle Boy before. But if we saw MJF versus Jungle Boy again, and we saw MJF potentially lose the AEW World Championship to Jungle Boy later down the line, that would be very interesting. I think it would be great, because it would be, first of all, it would be Jungle Boy's first main event on a pay-per-view, it better be on pay-per-view. And second of all, I think it would just be, honestly, I think it would just be flat out entertaining. I think the fans want to see Jungle Boy be AEW World Champion, and I think, like what MJF was saying, I think when MJF's reign of terror is over, like when his reign of terror finally starts to come to a closure, I think Jungle Boy will be in that position where he's going to be on top of the mountain. And when I'm talking about this concept right now with him and Hook and Big Bill and Lee Moriarty, it's not terrible, but I also feel like Jungle Boy is taking a few steps back from the position he was in, because he was in a position where he was fighting Christian Cage, Luchasaurus in a steel cage, and now he's fighting alongside, no offense, but he's fighting alongside a guy who personally isn't that popular. I mean, well, he's popular, but isn't that big of a name in the sense that all Hook does every single match is a few moves here, a few moves there, retains the FTW championship. It's nothing we haven't seen before, right? And so for a potential Hook and Jungle Boy tag team or brotherhood or whatever it is they're looking for, I don't know how to feel about it. And I don't know how to feel about this concept of it being against Big Bill because I don't see it being entertaining yet. Maybe down the line, maybe they'll do a little more. I also think it has to do a little bit with the idea of it being Lee Moriarty and Hook, two of which are still upcoming developmental superstars in AEW. Whereas Big Bill has been wrestling for how many years? He's wrestled over at WWE, he's wrestled over at Impact, and he's certainly made a name for himself. And Jungle Boy, same thing. I mean, Jungle Boy's been wrestling for AEW since day one, and I think it's safe to say that Jungle Boy is in a position where he doesn't really have to prove himself as much anymore. He has to prove himself as a single star, yes, but he's also in that position where he doesn't have to prove himself against guys like Lee Moriarty and Hook. He has to prove himself against guys like Jon Moxley and Darby Allin and Eddie Kingston, those guys. He needs to prove himself against the higher ups. He needs to prove himself against the more prestige type of wrestlers in AEW, not the rookies, not the upcomings, because Jungle Boy is not really an upcoming star. He's more so someone who is he's more so someone who was upcoming, but now he's starting to find a steady pace and a steady rhythm until he gets into that title picture. But yeah, those are my thoughts with the Jungle Boy situation, and honestly, I'm not going to open up too much about the MJF stuff because I kind of already did. I feel as though MJF as AEW World Champion is, honestly, it's one of the best things AEW's done. And I think it's going to provide a great story and just an all-around great thing for that of MJF. I think MJF is the best wrestler. I think he's the best guy on the microphone. I think everyone can agree with me on that. MJF, I genuinely believe MJF when he says he's a generational talent, because he really is. And so I think MJF fighting a guy like Jungle Boy later down the line, especially when MJF starts to simmer down and his reign of terror starts to come to an end, I think Jungle Boy is going to be red hot by that point. And I think it would be a shame for Tony Khan to look past that fact and not capitalize on putting Jungle Boy against MJF for the AEW World Championship. But that's just my personal opinion. Do I love Bryan Danielson? Yeah, sure. The dude's a great wrestler. I've never not once said that. I think Bryan Danielson's an incredible athlete, but do I think he's someone who I want to see beat MJF? No, because I'm sick and tired of seeing MJF fight these big names and then losing. He lost to Chris Jericho. He lost to CM Punk. He lost to Jon Moxley at some point in his career. Obviously, he's beat them all at least once. But when it comes to the big part, he usually loses. Until Full Gear, when he actually successfully defeated Jon Moxley. I don't want to see him lose to Danielson, especially not now, because it's too early, right? And I don't think it would make sense for Danielson to be AEW World Champion yet, because it would feel too rushed, because MJF just won the title, and MJF has, talked all this crap of I'm going to be champion until the bidding war of 2024. And that's where people really are starting to question, I think, is MJF actually going to hold the title that long? And so, personally, I think it's a better and smarter decision to keep the title on MJF until you have an upcoming superstar such as Jungle Boy, or even, I mean, hell, even this Action Andretti, maybe, okay, no, I take that back, don't even, you didn't hear me say that, such as Jungle Boy, or Darby Allin, or Sammy Guevara, or even Daniel Garcia or Wheeler Yuta, because they'll be ready at some point. all I'm saying is I don't think MJF is in that position yet where he's the best candidate for that of an AEW. I'm sorry. I mean, all I'm saying is I don't think Bryan Danielson is in that position where he's the best candidate for an AEW World Championship run, not because he can't do it, but because storyline-wise, I think it would come out rushed, and it wouldn't come out well developed, you know? It wouldn't be molded properly. Okay, so last topic of the evening, last topic of today's episode is I'm going to talk a little bit about the AEW women's division, specifically Jamie Hayter. So, Jamie Hayter is AEW Women's World Champion. In my personal opinion, there is some controversy going around this, and I say that in the sense that I'm sure some people are questioning her as AEW World Champion, considering that Thunder Rosa was injured, and considering that Jamie Hayter not only won the title due to Thunder Rosa's vacancy, kind of, like, she's the official AEW Women's World Champion now because of that, but not only did she win the intermediate title at first, she won it via Britt Baker and Rebel, right? You know, they kind of cheated for her, they used some underhanded tactics, and I think, that's not to take away from Jamie Hayter, that's more so just to kind of show where she still is right now in the totem pole. As AEW Women's World Champion, I think it's impressive to see her as champion right now, but I also think it's a little bit, like, it's one of those things that you question, like, oh, well, she's AEW Women's World Champion, but then, why? You know what I mean? Like, she's AEW Women's World Champion, but I wanted to see something a little more, I wanted to see something a little different. Because it's the same old, right? You know, Rebel and DMD, Dr. Britt Baker are helping her out. And so I think Jamie Hayter is in that position right now where she needs to prove herself as AEW Women's Champion and needs to push Britt and Rebel away. And I'm hoping, my hope is that Jamie Hayter is going to kind of traject Jamie Hayter into not necessarily a rivalry, but into a singles run in the sense that she finally disconnects from Britt Baker, and she finally disconnects from Rebel, and she starts focusing on herself. Because I'm going to be honest, Jamie Hayter, one of the most entertaining things that I found with Jamie Hayter was at AEW's All Out, when there was that potential of her possibly turning on Britt Baker. And I'm a little disappointed that they didn't do it, but I also understand why they didn't do it, because now they have an even better way of doing it, because she's in that AEW women's title spot right now. And if they play their cards right, they could completely utilize that, and this could light a fire under Jamie Hayter's feet to the point where she's skyrocketing away from Britt Baker, and she's fighting a bunch of top athletes like Chris Statlander, Saraya, Ruby Soho, Anna Jay, etc., etc., etc. I think if they use their cards right, I think Jamie Hayter can do some incredible things with that AEW Women's World Championship. And honestly, it reminds me a lot of Roxanne Perez, because I think both wrestlers right now are in a great position because they are in that underdog championship-like position where they can really do a lot of things with those belts. And not just for themselves, but for the company and for the other wrestlers that they are facing. And so I think that is something that AEW cannot sleep on. It's something that AEW has to look at, they have to capitalize on, and they have to realize we need to get on this right now. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I will see you guys in the next one. I will talk to you guys in the next one. Thank you again. I hope you all enjoy your New Year's. I hope you enjoyed this little conversation. And here's to 2023.